everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Joseph Hall. I am one of the Hall family, and we have the founder of our company with us today, Mr. John Hall Sr., off to my right. I guess I'm not sure how it shows up on the screen there, but the guy in the white shirt, the one he's got a few less hairs, a few gray hairs compared to myself, but I'm well on my way. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today as we're going to talk about the Yukon territory. And that excites me a lot because the Yukon does not get, I think, the recognition it deserves. It also does not, get toured as much as Alaska because it isn't an easy place to visit. It's not an easy place to get to. But the mark of our company is that we try to continue to do things that make us unique and give people experiences that they don't get other places. Just a brief introduction to our company for those of you who have not attended or don't know anything about us. Again, the name of our company is John Hall's Alaska, and we have been doing tours in Alaska since 1983. And believe it or not, that was the year I was born. So even though my parents did violate quite a few child labor laws, I wasn't working at that point. I started somewhere around 1989, I think was my first paying gig. And that was actually when I made my first trip up to Alaska. So I've seen a lot of transition in Alaska in my time, and this was not in my life plan to be in the business with you, but I'm glad it is because growing up, I wanted to be one thing, and that was a bus driver. And now my main job with our company is handling the fleet maintenance and the DOT compliance, which of course gets tougher and tougher every year, but I'm happy to do it. So backing up again, doing tours starting in 1983. My father used to run tours up the Alaska Highway and back, basically make that drive up, and it would be a 30 to 32 day tour.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine if you wonder about the way I talk or the way that I type or anything like that, I missed a lot of school in those very precious days when I should have been there learning my ABCs. But I did learn all 8 roads in Alaska by the time I left on my first trip. They were real easy. They're numbered 1 through 8. So the bar wasn't real high. But my father, what happened with our company, what happened with Alaska really as a whole is people's time became, I won't say much more valuable, but the time that they had to take vacations shrunk significantly because back when you started the company, our average age traveler was what, maybe late 70s?
Yeah, 65 to 75.
Yeah, so and most of them were retired farmers, and the big thing about that was they didn't have anything but time. Nowadays, our clientele has shifted, and it's slowly been shifting younger. And what that means is that if you have 10 days or 8 days or 15 days, whatever it might be, we want to pack as much in that time as possible, not necessarily spending time meandering through parts of Alaska that maybe aren't quite highlights, but they are definitely unique. So we in 1996 started working with the cruise lines in the fact that we partnered our land tours with cruises so that people could do both a land and a cruise program and do that in 2 weeks. And some of them were even as little as 10 or 11 days. And today we have a whole plethora of tours. We have 8 different itineraries that we run. And of course, the Yukon is a part of one of those. It's always been a big part of our company because the Alaska Highway runs obviously through the Yukon territory. And my father made his first trip to Alaska in 1955 with my grandfather. They were shipping eggs from Minnesota up to Alaska because fresh goods were so tough to get at that point. And obviously shipping isn't what it is today. There wasn't Amazon and FedEx. So there was Fed Haul. You put the 500 cases of eggs in a box truck and drove them to Alaska. Now I know what the road is like now going to Alaska. I've driven it several times. I know what it was like in 1989, and it's improved dramatically. I can't imagine what it was like in 1955. But the story goes, I don't know how much truth there is, because at times my father likes to embellish the truth a little bit, but he said that they made that entire trip. They went through 10 tires on that box truck, but they didn't break one egg. So again, I don't know if I believe that completely. Maybe he misremembered things, but he also says I misremember things from my childhood too. So today, moving forward, what separates us from all of our competitors is that we do still have tours that take in the crews. However, what really is different is we don't put the emphasis of Alaska on the cruise. We are still a land tour operator, and we are a land tour operator first. So we're always expanding, tweaking, trying to find ways to get people to different areas of Alaska that maybe they haven't been able to see before. And again, that's what keeps people coming back to Alaska. And I won't say this, I don't mean this in a bad way, but how many times can you take the same cruise itinerary and stop in the same places? In Alaska, you can go and you can spend 3 months there driving around on roads, and I guarantee that you won't see the same thing twice. Exactly. So again, that's why today we're going to talk about the Yukon. The emphasis again is always on Alaska, but the Yukon is actually like the little brother, or even call it the sister of Alaska. And even the tourism in the Yukon, they partner with Alaska a lot, because they are so close together and they're so closely related on many levels. The Yukon territory, very rugged, not a lot of roads, and Alaska is the same way. I think that's shocking to people. But I'll show you these maps here that kind of spell it out a little bit easier. But a lot of tour companies, again, they have kind of pulled out of the Yukon. There's not a lot going on there with the tour companies, because again, it's some longer days on the motor coach, but I can assure you, our motor coaches, you're not going to be riding on this one behind me. That's a 1958. You're going to be riding on the one behind John Sr., which is a late model MCI, and they take those frost heaves and everything very, very smooth. So again, it's a nice ride, and it's going to be a fantastic trip across the Yukon. And the thing that I love the most about driving the Alaska Highway is it gives you an example of how vast Alaska is, how vast the Yukon territory is, and how insignificant you are, because there's one road a lot of times.
And just to interject, that highway was changed in 2002. They took a lot of the curves out. Mm-hmm. They rerouted. They bypassed a lot of cities and now go around them. It's a lot easier than it is now. In fact, there's areas like around Pink Mountain where you can look off to the left and look down and see the old road as it snaked around the mountain curves.
Yep. Yeah, there's actually several places that there'll actually be a sign that says Historical Alaska Highway, and you'll go off on another road. And there's other places where I compare it to the Panama Canal. If any of you have been through the Panama Canal, I was lucky enough to go through the Panama Canal when they were building the new one. So that was back in 2013. And there were areas where we could see where the original Panama Canal was. And the same thing is true in Alaska, where all of a sudden there will just be a clearing about the width of a car that'll go off into the woods, and you know that that's one of the original parts of the highway.
Yeah, the Yukon has got some beautiful, the scenery in the Yukon is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, it is. And
history
and scenery. That's the thing too. And I if you folks get one thing out of this, even if you do not do a trip to the Yukon, when you're flying to Alaska, get a seat on the right side of the airplane. Even if it's not a clear day, you're going to be able to see two mountain ranges that will absolutely blow your mind. And that's part of Kluane National Park, which is, of course, a huge part of the Yukon. And the ice fields that actually exist there in those two mountain ranges, the Kluane and the Icefield Range, That's actually where the last existing ice is from our last ice age. And it's amazing. Go on Google Earth, you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about. And how that all connects together is if you travel through the Yukon, you're going to be traveling on one side of it. And if you do the cruise, you're going to be right on the other side of it, which is where Hubbard Glacier actually spills out into the Gulf of Alaska.
Yeah, right. Actually, Yakutat Bay on the west side, and then Kluane is on the east side.
Yep.
That we drive right up that highway.
Yep, exactly. And of course, Kluane Lake, that area, that portion, I'd say that drive from Whitehorse to Talbot Arm, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. And also if you're flying, if you know kind of what the lay of the land is, I've done this myself, been at 35,000 feet in a 737, and I've actually been able to see, okay, well, there's Kluane Lake and there's the road and everything. So it is very, very cool, but huge and very desolate. You see the picture that I brought up on the front there. If any of you see there, I put Merry New Year. That was supposed to be an inside joke for anybody that traveled or has been on our Facebook Lives, but even my brother didn't get it, so I don't expect any of you to. But it's just supposed to be a little giggle. But of course, we know the Yukon Territory, the Klondike Gold Rush. That's where the history comes from. And I won't say that there were as many ripples from the Klondike as the Alaska pipeline when it was put in Alaska, but they were very similar in the fact that they brought a lot of people to those areas. Many people stayed, many people made a lot of money, many people went home empty-handed. But there were two events that happened. Of course, they would have been 65, 68 years apart, but very similar as to what they did. And of course, in Alaska, the pipeline changed the whole landscape. Alaska would not be what it is today without the money that came in from that pipeline, because they used it to build a lot of the infrastructure that exists today. So getting again into the Yukon, two of the main things we're talking about: scenery, the wildlife. It's about as diverse as anywhere. They have everything. Yeah. They literally have everything, because you're far enough north, you're not too far north. And so and again, the mountains that you're going to see with the Kluane Range. And this is one thing here too, I just want to point out, if any of you are interested in the Gold Rush, and I know that Gold Rush, the TV show on Discovery Channel, and some of those TV shows have really been a catapult for people getting interested back in this. Here's a great coffee table book for you, The Klondike Quest. It's, again, good for me, because if you can read at a second grade level, it's mostly pictures. But it still has a lot of great informational captions and shows historical photos, which that's one of the most interesting things. And I think even today, you know, there's probably pictures that I deleted off my phone. I wish I wouldn't have. I was looking for one of those pictures that I've taken out the airplane looking at the Kluane National Park, and yet I can't find it. So great book if any of you are interested in that. Now, one of the questions I get a lot, because we do actually relocate our buses, a few of them, back to Minnesota. That's where our corporate office is, because we are located in a fantastic place to contact people who want to go to Alaska. And that's why our home office continues to be in Minnesota. We do also have a second office at a maintenance facility in Anchorage, Alaska. But I deadhead these coaches a lot myself, just because I know the coaches well. And if something does happen mechanically, you are on your own. You better be resourceful. You definitely don't want to panic. And so I don't want to put just anybody in that position. But people see my bus and they say, wow, what does that take you, 2 or 3 days to get there? Well, that's why I show this picture. Obviously, we can see where I am here in Minnesota. Legally, this is a 6-day trip. We can drive 10 hours in the lower 48, which that's what all the Alaskans call all of you people. And then once we get to Canada, we can drive 12 hours. And once we get to Alaska, we can drive for 15 because the DOT doesn't really care what we do in Alaska. No, actually, it comes down to that things are so far apart. We have a lot more lenient rules, but obviously we still can only work so many hours in a given week. But of course, we have Alaska right here, and then we have the Yukon right next door to it. And again, just one of the pictures I took 2 years ago when I drove back in the fall. This was actually at the Teslin Bridge, and you can see that right there. And you can imagine building the Alaska Highway. What they did with that was pretty amazing. They built that in what, 8 months and 12 days?
Yeah, under 9 months.
Yep. And it's absolutely amazing. And I think, I thought I read this somewhere in the past years that the original highway that you would have taken in 1955 was actually 300 miles longer.
Yes, you're right.
Than it is now.
Yeah. There's actually 2 mileposts. And that when they built this, they had a milepost 0 at Dawson Creek where it started. And then mile 1575 was in Fairbanks, even though it actually stops in Delta Junction. But there's 2 sets of numbers. There's the Alaska Highway numbers, and then there's what's called the old historical number. So, and there's 300 miles difference between those.
Okay. And so that's probably why I guess I've never been able to get an answer. I've never asked the question, but if you pick up the book called The Milepost, which is basically the Bible if you're going to drive the Alaska Highway or you're just interested in the Alaska Highway, it follows everything by basically tenths of miles and tells you where pull-offs are, where fuel stations are, where hotels are. There's actually 4 different listings there for every location. And I'm guessing one is the historical, one is the current, one is the historical kilometer marker, and one is the historical or the current kilometer marker, because obviously it depends on where you are. If you Google how far is it from somewhere in Canada to Alaska, it'll give it to you in kilometers. If you do it in the reverse way, it'll give it to you in miles. So
that bridge that you're looking at, when I went over that in 1955, that was logs. It was a log structure.
Yep, and I think that's one of the things that you'll hear about in Alaska too. Permafrost was a huge deal. There were many stories of equipment being lost because of permafrost. And what would happen is basically they would strip the land, and they didn't realize that the ground under that land was always frozen. It never ever thawed out. So they would strip the land, come back the next day to build the road, and excavators would be gone because it would all turn to mud and melt out. And literally, we're talking about I don't know what they had back there, but bulldozers. Probably.
I think they had some D9s.
I didn't know if they went back that far.
Maybe not.
But either way, there are pictures. If you Google Alaska Highway, there are pictures of basically just the hood of some of these trucks sticking out because they would have to lay down logs and logs and logs. And that's why we get these frost heaves. The other word of advice that I always give people, if you're going to drive the highway, look for black marks. If you see a set of black marks that are about, the width of a vehicle in front of you, slow down. That's somebody who had their cruise set at 70 miles an hour and thought it was going to be like I-90. They hit that frost heave and they came down and their car bottomed out. Trust me, I've been daydreaming and I've done it myself. And last year when I took Annabelle up, my sister's 160-pound Mastiff, I think she had shaken baby syndrome from some of those frost heaves. Now they've done a great job of, a lot of those areas, but there's kind of a fight going on right now between the Yukon Territory and Alaska because the Yukon Territory doesn't really want to they don't feel like they should have to pay for the upkeep on that road the last 90 miles or so. to Alaska because the only people that use it are from Alaska or going to Alaska. So there are still some rough parts, but it's definitely not like that. Now, this was just a fun thing I wanted to show you guys. When I made my first trip to Alaska in 1989, this was a hat that my father gave to me because everybody on the tours used to get a hat. Now, of course, you get a really nice jacket.
Why does that say 1988?
Well, that's what I'm going to get to. So I'm a middle child, so I mean that's probably part of it. I wasn't good enough for a 1989 hat, but you gave me one of the old hats, and one of the sweet women on the tour actually hemmed the back of it so that it would fit my head because I was 6 years old. I'm not going to fit in an adult sized hat. I mean, you can imagine, when you were driving bus and you were a tour manager, you'd have to have that hat hemmed because it'd have to be twice as big. So if you look real close at these pins, these are all the different places, and I think my dad bought me a few of them. But a lot of the sweet old women on the tour, they would buy a pin for me, places we stopped. The two that I want to point out, we have one up here on the top right, that's the Yukon. The other one is right here. This one with the sheep on it, that's the Talbot Arms Motel in Destruction Bay, which is right on the Kluane Lake. I'm sorry. And that, again, that's that area I talked about that is just beautiful. And that's also one of those places that you better stop there if you need anything.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing for about 3 hours that way, and there's nothing for about 3 hours that way. So I was telling that story that one of our tour managers and I drove the Alaska Highway in February a couple of years ago because we had a motor coach that we were bringing up there. And it was one of the greatest adventures I've had. It's terrifying at the same time that it's gratifying because, again, it's even worse. Obviously, you have inclement weather conditions. We had a flat tire going up the Alaska Highway in the Yukon Territory. But we left Talbot Arm, and they said it was supposed to start snowing. Well, that's right on the other side of that mountain range where, like you said, it basically creates its own snow. And thank God we had auto chains on that motor coach, and I was following it with an SUV and a trailer. And if it wouldn't have been for following, I wouldn't have been able to make it because he was making big enough ruts where I could actually drive. I mean, that snow, it started, people talk about, and the heaviest snow I've ever seen in my life is lake effect snow in Michigan. And this rivaled it. This was something else. And it was crazy. So I've done quite a few things that, again, I'd love to take groups and do, but the first time I get somebody from Ocala, Florida, that we have a little bit of adversity and 30 below temperatures, it might freak out a little bit. So it is a great drive through the Yukon, though. So getting back to, again, the maps. Kluane National Park that I keep referencing is down here in the bottom left-hand corner of the Yukon Territory, and that butts up to Wrangell St. Elias National Park. And between those two national parks, they actually are over 13 million acres of territory right there. And that's where I'm talking about those giant ice fields are. And again, one of the largest, most active tidewater glaciers in North America is fed by those ice fields. And that, again, is out into Yakutat Bay that we talked about if you're doing a cruise on the large cruise ship. But again, I encourage you to look at Google images of this area. It's just unbelievable. And then, of course, Kluane National Park has 17 of the country's highest 20 peaks in it. So that, if that gives you any idea of, how many mountains and how big those mountains are, it also has the second highest mountain in North America, which is, of course, Mount Logan, which is 19,551.
It's not much shorter than Denali.
Yeah, it's not. It's right up there. So very impressive. And what's cool about the Alaska Highway is it basically skirts right alongside of that mountain range. And then of course you'll pass through as you get closer to Alaska. Moving on here, a little bit more history with the Yukon Territory. Some of you may or may not know the Yukon Territory actually was at one point part of the Northwest Territories. And what happened is once people started actually coming in for the gold rush, that's when the Yukon was declared as its own territory. So you can see I've outlined right here the entire Northwest Territory. Obviously that line would be right here now for the Yukon. Now, most of you have probably read books, saw TV shows that talk about the 1898 gold rush. Well, very short-lived. It really did not last very long. I don't know what the overall time frame was, but started in sometime in 1896, and basically by 1899 it was over. And there were 100,000 estimated prospectors that went up to Alaska, or I'm sorry, to the Yukon to try to get rich. And there were some that got very rich, the early ones, and then there was also the people who sold goods to the people who were coming up to Alaska. And you hear a lot of stories about people that actually lost their lives because it was not for the faint of heart. People didn't know what they were getting into. They were people who were down on their luck for the most part, maybe in business or some other part. But again, it was crazy how many people came in. And I have a cool slide I'm going to show you here in a minute. One thing I forgot to mention at the start here, folks, there is a chat feature down at the bottom of the screen. And if you would like to ask questions, John Hall Jr. is actually monitoring that. And he will ask or answer those questions. I don't know if it'll be completely accurate, but at least he'll give you a good answer because he's a sales guy. So please utilize that chat feature if you want to.
There was, by the way, over 1,000 people that lost their lives going up the Chilkoot Trail.
Chilkoot Trail, yeah. So the picture that I showed you at the start of this, that was and is one of the famous pictures that you see people literally lined up in a row. And it's just incredible to think about. You're willing to make that sacrifice. You know, the gold was that important for them. And again, I just can't see myself in that situation. I don't even, if I see a gas line at the gas station, I'm out of there. So,
well, one of the issues that why so many people lost their lives was when they got this is actually down below is actually Alaska, and then they went through a short stint through British Columbia and then up to the Yukon. Mm-hmm. But when they arrived at the Yukon, the RCMPs were there, and they demanded you have 1,000 pounds of provisions. Mm-hmm. So they had to go back and re-provision in Skagway, then come back up again. So they were literally exhausted after that second or third trip up there, and that's basically what caused the loss of life.
Yeah, no, I can, and just the conditions too.
Yeah,
I mean, look at what they were actually trying to get through. It's incredible. So, of course, there is still some gold mining that takes place up there. One of the most interesting things that I think about the Yukon is the ability in the early 1900s for the gold dredges, the engineering of a gold dredge, yeah, and the efficiency of a gold dredge. If any of you have watched Gold Rush on the Discovery Channel, Tony Beats, what's he call himself, the Crazy Viking, something like that. He actually got one of these things up and running, but just to think that technology was there in the early 1900s, and you know, today they have the ability to do mining just like all other places where they can keep going down deeper and deeper and deeper. But these gold dredges would basically float on their own lake, and they would just go along, be grabbing the material, getting the gold out of it, and spitting the tailings out.
There's a good example of that when we are up at Dawson City to visit that gold dredge.
Yep, visiting a gold dredge is an absolute must if you go into the Yukon Territory.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew more about this, but I thought that they were trying to, maybe they did, make a national park out of the area where a lot of those ran. I tried to find a Google image of it because I found it at one point, and it's this vast area of land where you can just see the snaking material as those gold dredges ran through. It's just amazing. So that was another big part of it. Again, yes, you can still, of course, go up and work for one of those gold miners, or you can go to the Backcountry Lodge in Kantishna, where we take everybody, and everybody will find gold back there because we give you dirt that has gold in it. Now, if you don't find it, that's your own fault. So everybody finds gold, but nobody's paid for their trip yet by panning for gold. But you never know. There's got to be hope, right? Just a little bit better picture here. So if we were to drive the Alaska Highway, we would be, of course, coming up this route and be up towards Whitehorse, and then obviously we are taking this southern route right here. And then we also have this route here, which will head up to Dawson City. But just below here, this is where my dad was saying that the main entry point, Skagway was one of the main entry points. And that's important because Skagway, Dawson City, even Whitehorse, they understand that people want to go see these cities and feel like they're going back in time. And so they've left them, for the most part, some of them might be gift shops instead of saloons or something like that, but the overall look of the buildings still remains the same. So you feel like you are stepping back in time. But you can kind of see Kluane, again, how big that is right there on the left-hand side.
And you're actually following the Alaska Highway. If you can take your cursor and show them where, and you just go north of that. So you're following the national park all the way up.
Yep. And then as you get to Beaver Creek, that's actually the westernmost community in Canada. So you'll be able to, of course, get a good picture there. There's a good picture opportunity, and then you'll be in kind of again desolate strip for a while before you get to the city of Tok.
You can get a picture of the 1202.
I am not going to get a picture of the 1202, although it is still there. I'll tell you, 1202 Motor Lodge. But the Yukon Territory, obviously the sign right here. This is what it looks like in July. If you're going to go up there, you got to make sure that you bring your warmies with you. No, I'm joking, folks. It actually gets quite warm. This is a winter picture, but I thought it's fun to throw it in there. They keep those roads in good condition because obviously, just like Alaska, there's so few of these roads. They got to make sure that again they keep them clear and keep them moving. Now, one of the other interesting things about the Yukon Territory, it's where one of the most prominent dog races is run. I think most people have heard about the Iditarod. This is the Yukon Quest. And you can kind of see here my cursor. Obviously, this is the outline of Alaska and then the Yukon Territory next to it. But it's laid over the lower 48 and just showing the distance. And this is a dog race that spans 986 miles. So a friend of ours actually won that. He won it in 1988, and that was Mr. Dave Munson. And for any of you who have traveled with us or been to our travel shows, you've saw him, met him. That's him right there. Now, maybe what would have been a sore subject, I would have loved to be a fly on the wall at times, is his wife. Meanwhile, when he was winning the Yukon Quest in 1988, his wife won her third consecutive, no, 87, yeah, third consecutive Iditarod title in 1988, Miss Susan Butcher. So if you've heard Susan Butcher, she won the Iditarod 86, 87, 88, should have won it in 89, but a storm came in and she had to drop out, and she won it in 90. One of the most prominent, if not the most prominent, Iditarod musher of all time. But of course, we lost Susan back, and I think it was 2007. But our groups who do go to Alaska, you're going to go to this gentleman's home right here, Dave, who, again, the Yukon Quest probably doesn't get maybe the national recognition that it deserves, but I would say in the dog mushing world, it does. People understand it.
It's tougher than the Iditarod.
It is tougher, and the reason that it's tougher is that there's less checkpoints and they are much further spaced out, and that race has to go over 4 mountain ranges. It is not easy. So it's, I guess I don't know what to compare it to, but winning.
It'd be like driving the Alaska Highway in 1955 as compared to driving it today.
Have you ever driven it in March?
No.
Okay, well, or I should say February. Talk to me then.
No. But also, some of the people that are attending today may have come in contact with Laura Alloway, who used to be at the Trailbreaker Kennel. She, was it 2 years ago or last year that she ran the Yukon Quest? 2 years ago, I believe.
You'll have to enter the chat feature for that one.
Okay.
I can't remember which year she ran it, but I remember her. She was talking about it, but I can't remember exactly which year she ran it. So again, Yukon Quest, very, very important race.
Oh yeah, okay.
Oh,
enough said.
Did you need me to go back to the map?
No.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, you're right. 4 mountain ranges. It's a tough race.
Yeah, and I don't. Maybe John can chime in on this. I'm not exactly sure how many checkpoints there are on the Iditarod. I'm always up there for it, but there's a lot of those communities that I haven't been on or been to because they're very remote. But some of those, obviously, it's challenging terrain, but some of those checkpoints are 40 miles. I think some of the checkpoints on the Yukon Quest are 120, 130 miles apart. It's not an easy thing to do.
So it starts in Whitehorse and ends.
It starts in Houston, Texas, and ends in Seattle, Washington. No, it's going back here.
It starts in Fairbanks. It ends in Whitehorse, or Whitehorse to Fairbanks. One of the two.
I can't remember.
Anyway, you go through Dawson City, and
you start on whichever side you want to, and then as long as you finish on the other side. So getting back to the maps again here. So just to give you folks an idea, if you are going to travel up the Alaska Highway with us, you've already signed up on our fall tour, or I should say that'd be back down the Alaska Highway. You would be on this red route that you see right here, and that's traveling again along through Kluane, through Whitehorse, and then it's kind of interesting where you actually will cross from the Yukon Territory down into British Columbia, back up into the Yukon Territory, back down into British Columbia, back up to the Yukon Territory, and then finally back into British Columbia. So if any of you are truck drivers and you understand what IFTA is, International Fuel Tax Agreement, that section is a nightmare. So we have to obviously report our mileage in all of our jurisdictions. Now, back in, I don't remember the last year we ran this, but I want to say it was in the 2012-ish range. We used to run a 19-day tour that would basically do this entire loop that you see here in the Yukon. And we don't do that one anymore. However, we are going to be bringing back in 2022 a program that we ran back, had to have been, I think the last year we ran it must have been 2007 or 2008. And what that is it's an abbreviated tour where you will actually fly into Alaska. And keep in mind, you could do this in reverse fashion as well. But you fly into Alaska, you're going to get to see all the high points of Alaska. Then you're going to take this blue route and you're going to travel over the top of the world highway through Dawson City, down into Whitehorse. And then you are actually, so what you are actually doing here is you are taking that route that the gold miners took when they came up, because we are going to end up down in Skagway. So we are going to drive the bus down in there. Actually, we'll be doing the rail on the last portion. One of the main entry points besides the Chilkoot Trail for the gold miners in 1896, 1898 was the White Pass Trail. And there's an amazing train ride, which will travel about 20 miles of that. And just to see that section with again, you're traveling on a train, but seeing that people had to do that, walking and horseback, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's all narrated, so you're getting the gold rush history on that.
Yep. And so I'll
about 3.5 hours, 4 hours.
And I'll show you kind of a map of what that used to look like. Although I'll tell you that before Lauren came to work for us, who does our website and catalog now, our maps were, I don't know, probably more like a Denny's coloring. The what do you call them? The placemats we used to color on.
Yeah.
They weren't very good. They're very good now. She does a great job with them. But this is going to, what this tour is going to give you is, if you have 12 days, you're going to be able to see Alaska. You're going to be able to see the Yukon Territory. And what we've done very special is we have added the ability to, rather than go on the large cruise ship, you're going to get on a catamaran with no more than 40 people. And you are going to be traveling Southeast Alaska on that catamaran. So you don't overnight on the boat, but it is a much different experience seeing Southeast Alaska from a vessel that's 78 feet long versus 950 feet long.
Yeah, you're going to be able to get right in close to everything.
Yep. So that's the reason that we're bringing this program back, is that we've wanted to be able to try to have a tour in that 2 weeks and less range that encompassed Alaska, the Yukon, and Southeast Alaska, but it just hadn't been possible until we came up with this catamaran.
Yeah, this is an incredible route, the blue route that we have.
Yeah,
because we overnight, stop in Chicken, Alaska, and then overnight, I believe 2 nights in Dawson City.
That's the plan.
And then you can get a chance to do the sourdough cocktail and visit some neat places up there. There's a lot of history in Dawson City.
Yep.
Jack London's home log cabin is there. And then we'll come down through Camarax, and there's a place called the Brayburn Lodge that has the largest cinnamon rolls I've ever seen on earth. They are as big as a 10-inch dinner plate. They cover the entire plate. And then we'll come down and spend night in Whitehorse, and then down to Skagway.
I saw you make a cinnamon roll bigger than that in the last couple months.
Well, so that's true. That's true.
He's always got to be one-upping people.
That's a 12-inch made in a 12-inch iron skillet.
Yep. It's awesome for 0 calories.
Yeah.
Now, this was the something I wanted to throw in here. This is actually a map from the White Pass and Yukon route, which is the train we were talking about. And the White Pass obviously still travels the White Pass route today, but they used to sell packages to get to Alaska, because people would get out to Seattle or Vancouver and then they would make their way north. Well, they either came up on a boat and then, of course, jumped on the Yukon River after they passed through either, the White Pass or Chilkoot, and then made their way up to Dawson City. Now, this was something that I wasn't even aware of until I'm not going to tell you I read it, because I bought the audio book, Michener's Alaska. And I figured, that's a good way to I can listen to it on the way back from Alaska. It's 56 hours long. 56 hours. So I got through half of it. I changed phones and it didn't transfer over. But this was one of the things that they talked about, that they would take this boat route over here into the Bering Sea. And when they kept saying the Bering Sea, I kept saying, no, they're misspeaking. There's no way that this is possible. But they would actually enter the Yukon River from the western side of Alaska. Because you think about it, what's so interesting is, we take the Mississippi River, for example, that we live on right here, and all the old towns are along the river. Well, that's the case in Alaska. You talk about Dawson City and you talk about Fairbanks, but when you look at this territory, it's not easy for people to get there. I mean, you don't just go up a road and get there. So it only makes sense that they got there on that river. And that river actually originates down in British Columbia and flows all the way north. Basically, that's that line that you're seeing. And it's just short of 2,000 miles. So it's an amazing river. This is such a crazy thing this was what, from 1909?
1909. Yeah.
It was a 1909 brochure, and I don't think they told you how many days it was going to be, but those were the access points. That's how you would access Fairbanks, Dawson City at that point. Now, just to show you, we talked about Kluane down here, where kind of we would cross part of the Yukon River. We obviously see the Yukon River at different places in Alaska, but we're way down here where we're talking about it originating. And there's a picture that I took. This is actually just south of the Arctic Circle. And this is the bridge that crosses the Yukon River right here.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just crazy to think that river travels that much space. So very cool. Obviously, that's a winter thing. But, we see that river all over the place. Now, the Alaska Highway, we talked about that. The construction of the highway, very, very tough. But here were a couple of pictures that we had for the brochures, and I don't know which bridge that is. I
think that's
I don't know that it is. It's not. Is that the Peace River Bridge? Maybe.
Could be. Yeah.
But they're very long, obviously, and the Coal River Bridge as well. You see here, but again, American ingenuity, and you're going to go by a place called Contact Creek. Actually, that's one of the places we stop when we're deadheading because they have the cheapest fuel. It's one of those places where you cut back into or you go up into the Yukon before you cut back into British Columbia. Obviously, British Columbia has higher fuel tax, so try to get fuel there. But it's called Contact Creek because that was the meeting point for the two parties that were building, obviously the two sides that were building the highway. They met there, so called Contact Creek. So yeah, pretty awesome.
You really think you're saving money by buying that fuel in the Yukon rather than British Columbia?
Yeah, good point.
Because when you file, they're charging 29 cents a mile anyway.
Right. Whatever. So. Well, I like the people that run the lodge.
Yeah,
they're always nice. They remember us. They
getting back to that Yukon River just for a moment. When we're in Whitehorse, that Yukon River runs through an area called Miles Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of the most spectacular views because that big river has cut down through the cliffs, and it's I'm going to say it's probably 100, 150, 200 feet down, but it's cut through those rocks, and it's just a beautiful viewpoint.
Yeah, and again, if any of you have read books, saw movies from that place and time, you've heard the Yukon River referenced.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of again. this is a sneak peek. We have not released the details, but we are going to basically duplicate this tour. This was from our 2003 catalog, where we do Alaska. So you get Anchorage, you get Denali, you get Fairbanks, and then of course we're heading over to Dawson City, Whitehorse, and we're not going to be going all the way down to Vancouver. We're going to be staying completely within Southeast Alaska here. So again, this is the first sneak peek. We're just kind of telling people that that's going to be on the books because there is some interest in the Yukon, and as of now in 2021, the only way to go through the Yukon is on our highway tour, and that tour is sold out right now. So if you're looking down the road and you want to visit the Yukon, this is going to be a phenomenal trip for you. Even for folks who have been to Alaska, it's going to be a phenomenal return trip, because how many times have you been in Denali, and how many times have you saw the same thing?
But in addition to that, you're going to experience, like you say, the top of the world highway, the historical Dawson City, coming down into the Southeast Alaska, touring from Skagway, Juneau, the smaller villages, and just being able to get close to the shore, the wildlife, the scenery is just spectacular. So if you've been to Alaska, some people have been there 5, 6, 7 times with us. This is going to be something totally different. New experience.
Yep. Throwing that catamaran option in there, I think, is really gonna take that product to such a unique experience. And again, that's what our company is based on, is experiences, not on numbers, not on how many people we can get through the state or get through the Yukon. It's when you come back home, we want you to talk about this tour for 10 years and tell people about the things that you did in Alaska that most people didn't, because they probably did a cookie cutter tour with a very large tour company, and they saw Alaska, but they didn't experience it. Well, thank you again, everybody. I hope everyone has a very safe but positive, happy New Year. Again, there's going to be positives. We're ready to move on.
Absolutely. And again, Happy New Year from our family to yours. And we're looking forward to serving you in the near future.
Thank you, folks. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.